California calls with its breathtaking heights, miles of rushing coastline, and daily opportunity to turn hot ambition
Sagan is on Whippet's wheel. Sagan comes on the barriers
into rock-solid fact.
A dash for the line now. Peter Sagan has done it. An incredible result for Peter Sagan.
Two pelotons packed with the sport's top riders, inspired by a worldwide cause, dedicated to dropping boundaries.
This is Katie Hall, who's trying to stay away to the finish.
They push the outer limits of what lies within.
And now Katie Hall is riding home to a yellow jersey.
On the storied roads of the Golden State, America's biggest bike race rolls on again. Speed, guts, and superstars. They've heard the call. This is the Amgen Tour of California preview show presented by Visit California. Last year, the Amgen Tour of California was a coming-out party of sorts for Egan Bernal. The Colombian sensation showed off his climbing skills to clinch the overall title before going on to help his teammate, Geraint Thomas, win the Tour de France later in the summer. Hello, everyone. Welcome inside our NBC Sports Studios. I'm Paul Burmeister. Very happy to have the band back together a little bit. To my left, former pro riders Christian Vande Velde and Bob Brohl. Guys, I'm used to only seeing you in Europe in June and July, so it's nice to have you in May here on the East Coast. How you been?
You've been busy. I haven't been busy except growing my beard. And until a couple of days ago, it was formidable.
It was outstanding.
It was.
Yeah.
We got proof of it. We'll put it out on Twitter later or whatever, Instagram.
I mentioned Egan Bernal, guys. You know the name very well. He's not going to be there to defend his title. He will be racing, though, in the Giro, trying to win that one. The 2017 winner of the Amgen Tour of California, George Bennett, is back, though, Bob.
George Bennett had a fantastic ride 2 years ago in the Amgen Tour of California, carried that momentum forward for the rest of the season and the rest of his career, but was a real coming-out party for George Bennett. And surprisingly was his performance in the time trial. He was very strong in the mountains, but it was the TT, which, by the way, not in Tour of California this year. We'll get to that later. And this is the event where he solidified his advantage over the other climbers, the individual time trial. Watch for him to be a factor to contend with in this year's Amgen Tour of California, for sure.
No, I'm going to agree with that, Bob. I mean, he blindsided me with that time trial. And then he had a great Tour de France, very respectable, crashed out at stage 16. 2018 was great. He had a strong Paris-Nice, getting 6th place. So, yeah, I think he's on top of my list as one of the favorites for going into this year's Amgen Tour of California.
As for some other names who just might contend, let's take a look at the list of recent winners. Some people may forget that Peter Sagan actually won this race back in 2015. Impressive, much more on him coming up later. But for now, let's focus on the last American to win. That was back in 2013, TJ Van Garderen, who also finished in 2nd place overall at last year's edition. TJ, obviously a fan favorite in the States. He has a new team in Education First. What are your expectations for him?
I think that TJ is going to have a very good Tour of California. On his best, he's one of the best climbers in the sport. No time trial. That helped him a lot last year against Egan Bernal. He couldn't quite keep his advantage all the way to the end, but such a strong climber. Tour of California race course should suit him.
It should suit him, but it's a big detriment to not having that time trial in there. So that's going to hurt him a little bit. And I think a lot of depends on how good Rigoberto Urán is. If Rigo's really good, that he might have to work for him. But his schedule is perfect for this race. He hasn't raced in a while, so he's ready to go.
You mentioned one big name on his team. Let's take a look at the support TJ will have. See that Rigoberto Urán is there. Christian, talk about him. He took 2nd place at the 2017 Tour. Lawson Craddock was twice the best young rider here and took 3rd place at the 2014 Amgen Tour of California. Of course, Taylor Phinney, always a great teammate. But how much of an advantage is it for TJ to have guys like this helping him along the way?
This might be the strongest team in this year's Tour of California. And to have Rigoberto Urán, Sergio Uita, who we haven't talked about a lot, but he could be very strong in the mountains. Of course, Lachlan Morton, one of the best climbers in the business. And for the flats, you've got Taylor Phinney. That is a solid squad.
Agreed. And it really depends a lot on Rigo. Like, we're going to keep on going back to this. We're going to be saying it all throughout the race, how he has come back after breaking his collarbone. It's going to be pretty much 2 months to the date. He's gone back to Medellin, have great training up there in the high mountains. So we're going to think about going to the high mountains, going into Lake Tahoe, and then, of course, the mountaintop finish. So a lot of that hinges on how good he's recovered from that crash.
Amgen Tour of California hasn't been around a super long time, but some pretty good history. You look at the race, it's provided a chance for a lot of stars to break out and really make a name for themselves in front of the American audience. The biggest names sit to top the list for most stages won at the Amgen Tour of California. Peter Sagan seems to have found a home away from home in California. 16 wins. You may have heard of the rider in second place there with 10. Mark Cavendish also has blossomed over the past 10 years at this race. But back to Peter Sagan. Why do you think he's done so well in this race?
16 stage wins is unbelievable, and 7 points jerseys in a pretty short history. He started in 2010, started winning stages immediately. I think he won 5 stages in one edition of the Amgen Tour of California. And I asked myself, like, why? So I asked Peter. He said, I love California. I love to come. I love to show my skills.
Hard to believe,
off.
huh?
Yeah, hard
right?
to believe.
Hard to believe. And he's such a dynamic personality that he and the Tour of California, they were just born to be together.
Yeah, I think he was born in the wrong country. And if he was going to be born in this country, it would be in California. And I could actually see him moving, honestly, after his career, post-career. I mean, you see the guy going with a surfboard underneath his arm, living in L.A. I mean, he could be Long Beach forever. I mean, so I think a lot of these guys you'll see throughout the week who just enjoy being in this race because of that. I mean, you're at everything about Tour of California is just different. And I think Peter's one of those guys who really embraces that.
Get a little more Hermosa Beach vibe than Long Beach.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to take that back. Thank you for
Either
correcting
one
me.
would work.
I agree.
I'm sure he'd be psyched with either one. Going to be a while before anyone contends with those 16 stage wins and counting. Who else comes to mind who's really made you take notice of his game in this race?
Fernando Gaviria, for me, last year, the dominant sprinter, and also won the points, which Peter Sagan has almost never beaten in the points competition in any stage race that he does. So Gaviria had a big breakout, took that momentum forward to get some stage wins in the Tour de France, but 3 sprint stage wins for Fernando Gaviria, and that was a really cool to watch a young Colombian and rise to the top of the sport shortly thereafter.
I mean, really, the list is endless, but I think Julian Alaphilippe, if you think about going for the GC guys, and we already talked about George Bennett, but Julian, what he did, we already knew he was amazing, just like Fernando. But what he did in a stage race and what he did on a mountaintop finish, and then, of course, now we see him all the time doing every stage race he goes to, every one-day race he goes to, the Tour de France with the mountain stage. I mean, so this kid is obviously phenomenal, but we saw that for the first time here at the stage race.
Yeah, both of those names, they kind of raised their hand and let us know they're going to be around at the Tour, and both those guys showed up in a big way last summer over there. In addition to the men's competition, there is the Amgen Tour California women's race, empowered by SRAM. That will kick off on Thursday, May 16th. Last year, no woman was faster on the California streets than the American Katie Hall.
Katie Hall had a phenomenal Tour of California. A bit disappointing 2 years ago to lose, but Katie Hall dominated the stage to Tahoe. Had such a big lead at the end of that, none of the other women could get close to her in the overall standings. She's one of the best climbers on the planet. She's changed teams. She's on the Boels-Dolman squad from Europe now, but she'll be back with a very tough mountainous stage for the women. One of the definite pre-race favorites. Absolutely phenomenal race last year to win the title.
Oh, no, there's no doubt. No one was even close. But this year's, really, when you look at the host of people who are coming this year, it's a different story altogether. So Katie's already had it. She was up there top 20 last week in Liège-Bastogne-Liège in horrible, horrible conditions, 39 degrees and raining. But it's a I have to always say, with all just we were saying before, the American race, everyone steps up, especially if you're American. You're highlighting this race. So Katie Hall wants to be back up there again, especially wearing number 1.
Katie Hall is the name that comes to mind first here, Bob. Names of other women that we should be on the lookout for?
Well, one of Katie's teammates actually this year is Anna van der Breggen, perhaps the best women's racer in the world currently. Annemiek van Vleuten also is a great racer, but Anna van der Breggen is so phenomenal. You can't count her out in any race that she enters.
Oh, no way. Olympic champion, world champion. She's the current world champion as well. She just won Flèche Wallonne. She's absolutely flying. She even won a mountain bike race earlier this year. So, yeah, Anna van der Breggen, it'd be really hard to say who the leaders are for this race without speaking about Anna van der Breggen.
All right, guys, just getting started. All kinds of ground left to cover. When we come back, we'll dive into this year's routes. We'll take a look at the jerseys, literally, the riders will be competing for. Plus, Bob and Christian will make predictions on who will win those jerseys. That is all still to come. Stay with us.
The Amgen Tour of California preview show on NBCSN is brought to you by AEG. Give the world a reason to cheer. By Amgen. in the race to dramatically improve patients' lives. Visit us at Amgen.com. By Lexus, experience amazing. And by Visit California. Start your tour of the Golden State at visitcalifornia.com. California, dream big.
I've had people ask, what's the coolest place you've ever raced in? And you know, it's pretty cool right here in California, honestly.
Sunshine, good fans, and awesome racing.
You can go surfing in the morning, and then in the afternoon you can go, downhill skiing.
What's not to love? You have beautiful roads, beautiful scenery.
Rolling hills, big mountains, big ocean views.
I just feel very relaxed in Tour of California. It's the best race.
All that sentiment pretty easy to understand. In fact, if you spend any time around a World Tour team, and you'll soon find out that riding in the Amgen Tour of California is high on just about every rider's wish list. Good food, big hotel beds, all that scenery, and of course so beautiful it could double as a movie set.
3, 2, 1,
This year, the peloton races north to south down the Golden State. The state capitol helps get things started on Stage 1, presented by Amgen, with a flat, fast rip through the northern Central Valley. A 3-lap circuit back in Sacramento promises a high-speed finish. 14,500 feet of climbing in Stage 2, presented by Visit California, should give a few clues to the overall leaderboard. The day starts in a new host city, Rancho Cordova, and ends at the Heavenly Ski Resort in South Lake Tahoe. The views are spectacular, and the ride should leave the peloton breathless. Stage 3, presented by Tag Heuer, keeps the vertical coming as it runs from Stockton to Morgan Hill. 10,000 feet of suffering is on tap, but a long descent off Mount Hamilton with a flat 20 miles into the finish should wind up in a sprint. Why come to California if you don't spend some time on the coast? Stage 4, presented by Lexus, revs up at the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca and then charges along the Pacific before a beautiful but tough uphill finish in Morro Bay. Fans get a double dose of race action in Stage 5, presented by Lexus. The Amgen Tour of California women's race, empowered by SRAM, starts and finishes at Stage 1 in Ventura. The 60-mile course includes some chunky climbing and wraps up on the same streets as the men, who race from Pismo Beach over 138 miles. A regular stop on the Amgen Tour of California is the sun-blasted summit of Mount Baldy. This year, it takes the measure of the women and the men in their respective stages 2 and 6, presented by Visit California. Chances are good that this will be the decisive day of both races. Running from Santa Clarita to Pasadena, the final stage presented by Amgen of both the men's and women's race promises a rugged day in the saddle. After trekking through the San Gabriel Mountains, riders charge past Pasadena's iconic Rose Bowl for what's sure to be a thrilling finish.
A quick look at the numbers now. The men will cover 733 total miles, including 3 flat stages for the sprinters, a couple of hillier stages, and 2 decisive mountain climbs, each with summit finishes. The women will ride about 178 miles total over 3 stages. It'll finish with the summit finish there at Mount Baldy. Here's a good one for you. Back when the race started in 2006, Netflix was still in the business of renting DVDs. They didn't offer a streaming service. Feels like it should have been 100 years ago instead of a little over 10. But in those ancient days, the race got started as a February event. How have you guys seen this competition grow to what it is today, really the only World Tour race in this country?
Well, it's the preeminent race that we have in the United States, and it couldn't be in a better place. California is a perfect topography for this type of event, and it's just been great to witness the growth of the Tour of California. And for the people in the United States, it is a race that we have that is on par with all the European races, and it's been wonderful to watch their evolution as an event.
Well, I remember 2006 very well, getting that invited there, and how excited I was to be able to race on our home ground early in the year. It was in February, and then see what it grown to now, and now have World Tour points available. It's not a joke anymore. Before it was, okay, we get a little bit dog and pony that we were racing in California, and we had some great teams, great really good competition. But now, with those points on the line, it's not a joking matter anymore. These garner big money for big teams. So everyone's bringing their game here.
Both you guys have spent a lot of years racing in Europe, so you can compare very well what happens over there to what happens here in California. What makes the Tour of California such a welcome change for so many of these riders?
Well, it's beautiful weather generally. The hotels, which makes a huge difference because when
Air
you're a biker,
right?
AC when it's
after
really
riding
hot,
all day, that matters.
Recovery is so important, and when you're relaxed and you have a beautiful room and great food, you just love racing. It doesn't make the racing easier, but it does make in between a lot more enjoyable, and that's what the Tour of California brings to the riders, and that's why they want to be here. It starts the summer off in the right direction.
Yeah, it's almost like it starts, quarter two of the year, but yeah, it's like everything from some people embrace it a little bit too much, shopping, going to get their Apple products, and getting room service. But yeah, it's just a whole conglomerate. But the racing side, though, it's a little bit more low key. The bigger roads, it's not as stressful as the small European streets. So it's a little bit, I'm just going to say a little bit more easier. I don't know how to explain it for it, but it is easier to move up. It's easier, a little bit lower, less stress is the best way to put it.
I don't think anybody would describe it as easy. Listen to how you guys talk about it, but easier certainly
less
makes
stressful.
sense. Yeah. Makes sense to listen to. All right, from scenery, let's move on to strategy. The Tour is only a little over 2 months away. How does the Amgen Tour of California help the guys prepare for what's coming in July?
You need race miles to get ready for the big objectives of the year. And if the Tour de France is one of your big objectives, this race is fantastic for that. We alluded to a little bit of what the riders go through in between stages, and smooth pavement, not nearly as much traffic furniture. So the racing is physically hard, but emotionally it's a lot more rewarding. And so when you look at the rest of your schedule, Tour of California is a perfect way to get the Grand Tours and the rest of the summer season, the big races, started.
I always thought of this as Tour of California is almost like turning the page. So it doesn't matter what happened this spring. So if you had a horrific spring, which some of these riders have had, it's a time to really just say, okay, this is the second half of the year. Like, it doesn't matter what happened the first half, turn the page, train hard. A lot of these guys will be coming off a rest after doing a big block in the spring. They're turning the page looking for California, get those base miles like Bob was saying, and there's a lot of them, 730 some miles. That's a ton of racing over 7 days. So getting those race miles back and then looking forward to the Tour de France.
In a relatively short period of time, as we just talked about, 13 years it's always been around. This event has earned a reputation as a first-class event, as you guys talked about, and perhaps the best example of that is how the Amgen Tour of California women's race, empowered by SRAM, has evolved. Back in 2011, it was a time trial that showcased only 13 of the best women. Now in 2019, in a very good way, it's an entirely different production.
This is a major priority from the race organizers, from the Amgen Tour of California, is the women's event. Equal prize money to the men. And they get to race earlier in the day on the same course. That's what I think is so beautiful about it. So the fans that have come out to the race, they can see two races, the best women in the world finishing on the exact same course as the men. Then, of course, a little bit later in the day, the men finish there also. But it's great to have the women at such a high level prioritized by the organizers. I really appreciate that about the Amgen Tour of California.
Yeah, same roads, same fans. I think the Amgen Tour of California is really setting the bar of what is expectation for what women's cycling should be. There's no reason that a lot of these, I know there's a lot of hurdles, and I know that Amgen Tour of California has moved mountains to make sure this happens. So next is just gonna be more TV product. Everything's just gonna keep on falling in line.
And I can't wait to see the Strava numbers from the women. And so the amateur cyclists can compare themselves to that and see how much slower they are.
Be like,
that's it, end of conversation.
We can all gather from how everyone is describing, how these two are describing the event. The Amgen Tour of California is a competition about international bike racing at its finest, but it's also about good health and the promotion of healthy lifestyles, as it should be. Since 2005, the Breakaway from Cancer initiative has increased awareness of important resources available to people affected, and the Breakaway from Heart Disease movement has encouraged Americans to take charge of their own risk of heart disease. This year, the newly formed Breakaway Challenge urges participants to turn their walking, running, or cycling miles into support for 8 independent nonprofit advocacy organizations that are dedicated to cancer and heart disease research. For a 6 weeks period that begins May 1 and goes through June 12th, and that's of this year, Amgen will donate $1 for every Breakaway Challenge mile completed by initiative participants, all the way up to $400,000. You guys signed up?
Signed up.
I'm signed up. Luckily, it's not the time, it's just the miles, because my time would be so far behind Christian.
I don't know, I've seen you guys ride together.
You talk some trash these days, man. You've been riding way more. I've been on an airplane much more than I've been on my bike seat. But no, we're all signed up. And when I signed up, there's already 40,000 people signed up, and that was like day one. So, I mean, I think that's going to go through the roof really quickly. So if you haven't signed up, sign up quickly, because those miles are going to go very fast.
All right, everybody who knows the event knows this. The Amgen Tour of California has always showcased the speedy sprinters. When we come back, we'll take a look at which fast men will be fighting for glory. It's all coming up next on the Amgen Tour of California preview show presented by Visit California.
Three times he has won in Sacramento. The Manx missile is on a direct hit once again. We've got Kittel on the left, Christoph on the right, the two top sprinters. But the top sprinter is Marcel Kittel as he comes up to the line and takes it.
The city of Sacramento has hosted a finish in 10 of the 13 editions, with each being a sprint, except back in 2009 when Fabian Cancellara won the prologue time trial. Last year's winner, Fernando Gaviria, is not back this year, but Marcel Kittel is. And one rider who has dominated this finish with 4 wins, Mark Cavendish, is back as well. Guys, he is hoping to get back up to speed here after a couple of years where he has, putting it nicely, been less than his best.
It's been hard to watch. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's ever since really two or three years ago, he's really faltered. And since the 2016, where he was all in with the Olympics, he's killing it. Really, when he won that stage, that was a turning point. He won that stage in 2016. He went on to crush the Tour de France and then the Olympics. And then since then, I think he just went a little bit too far in. He's had a reboot. I got to spend a lot of time with him in October this last year. And I love Cav to death, but he had a rough spring this year. And like Bob and I were just saying off screen, it's been really hard to watch. And we were all pulling for him. And believe me, this kid has ambitions still in the sport that go very deep. He still wants to beat Eddie Merckx's record. He still wants to be on the top, especially in California. He loves coming here. He brings his family out there to vacation. He has training camps out there. He's one of those guys that just, he loves the sport still. He loves California. And believe me, if he can, he will be on the top step. It's just really whether or not his body wants to respond or not.
You say kid, and if he can, he will.
Well, for me,
he's right. Well, for all of us, he's a kid, anybody who's in the 30s, but he's going to be 34 this summer. You guys know this very well. Is that age, is that a problem? Is he at that point where age is an issue?
In any other sport, you might say, yes, he's not at his best, especially the fast twitch sprinters.
Right. Well put.
But it depends on the rider. Some sprinters go deep into their 30s, still successful. And I think Cavendish has the speed, he has the charisma, he just needs to put it together. And I think if any race on the calendar is going to be the place for him to do that and start to get near the front, it's the Tour of California. It's going to be very intriguing to see how Cavendish does Tour of California this year.
Marcel Kittel, the three of us have been sitting together at many stages at the Tour where he's dominated, looked impressive, and then he can kind of disappear for a while. What do you expect this summer?
Almost the same. I mean, he's been missing in action for a while, and he just pulled out of a race actually this morning. So I don't know. But I don't know Kittel as well as I do Cav, and I don't know how much of his ambition is really there, or if it's not there, or what he says in the press is really legitimate, or if he's kind of mailing it in. Which I doubt. I don't think that any bike racer out there is mailing it. It's too hard of a sport. It's either you're here or you're not. So, yeah, I mean, Marcel is a phenomenal sprinter. We all know that. He's a monster of a man, and when he sprints at the best, it's almost untouchable. But it'd be interesting to see what he can do here. He needs to show something for himself and his team.
Yeah, the pressure is definitely on Kittel and his teammates to do a good lead out. They need to start perfecting that before the Tour de France. But Kittel, one of the fastest men on the planet. It's going to be great to see him going up against Sagan and Cavendish.
It'd be fun to watch him race against Sagan. 16 stage wins at the Amgen Tour of California. Do you see him adding to that this time around?
Yeah. You're never going to bet against him. There's no way. You've got to, like, Peter, when he comes to a race, you know that he's always going to be in the hunt, no matter what kind of race. Even if it's a sideways stage, he's still going to be there somehow. I mean, even the stage in 2010, going up to Tahoe, he won that stage. Come on, man. I mean, these are the kind of things.
It's not fair.
It's not fair. So
it's not fair.
We're not counting him out of anything. He hasn't had the best of strengths, but we'll see.
Sagan is a phenom. He
Never gonna
loves
doubt him.
California. I love watching him race. Loves the fans out here.
Yeah.
Stage wins for Sagan.
All right, that would be adding to already a record at 16. Let's go to the women's side now and talk about Corinne Rivera. She got into the sport by riding with her dad, and she's now one of the fastest women anywhere, and she had a big win in California back in 2017. Where do you think she fits in the mix this year?
It's such a joy to watch Corinne racing. She's always competitive. Anytime there is a sprint, no matter where it is. This is a phenomenal uncorking. She's in the black and white jersey of the Sunweb squad and just right across the barriers. Pitch perfect, sprinting, and no one was touching her. And I can see her winning some stages in the upcoming Amgen Tour of California as well. To add to her total, that was a fantastic win against some of the fastest racers on the planet.
I agreed with that, and I'm thinking that she could actually go up and over the climb on Sunday as well, going into Pasadena. Well, I think that some of them won't be able to get up and over that climb, but she's got more competition this year. Kirsten Wild, Anna van der Breggen, Kendall Ryan, who won last year. But it'll be interesting to see who could actually compete on that Sunday, especially on the heels of the really hard Mount Baldy stage.
All right, so one of the topics we talk about throughout every stage in the race is the competition within the competition. There are 5 jerseys up for grabs each day. The Amgen overall yellow leaders jersey given to the rider with the lowest cumulative time. The Visit California green points jersey for best sprinter. The Lexus King and Queen of the Mountains jersey. The Tag Heuer best young riders jersey. And finally, Amgen's breakaway from cancer and heart disease most courageous jersey. The guys were sorting, bringing out jerseys here. And we now have a more colorful set. What do we have in front of us?
I've got the points jersey. Peter Sagan's won this 7 times in the Amgen Tour of California. Over half of the editions. And he's going to go number 8 coming. That's for me. It's the I love the green jersey.
So we got the polka dot. So Bob, this is the
women's version.
The KOM and the QOM. Sponsored by Lexus on the back here.
Yes.
And then right to the best young riders jersey, which has changed a little bit, but always been Tag Heuer.
Christian probably got a free watch with that, knowing Christian.
No. That's same company, but not necessarily. And then, of course, the one that everyone's really going for, Amgen Tour of California, yellow jersey.
All right. You guys have more than I do, but I have one here. Perhaps it's the most unique prize, the Amgen Breakaway from Cancer and Heart Disease Most Courageous Rider. As we take a look at the riders who won this jersey last year, it's a meaningful competition that gets awarded to the man or woman, respectively, who best exemplifies the character of those engaged in the fight against cancer and heart disease. Courage, sacrifice, inspiration, determination, and perseverance. Makes me think of our colleague Jens Voigt or Vogt. He still tells me something different every time I ride with him at the tour. I think he would be a prime candidate for this jersey.
Oh, absolutely. He's just so strong. He won it back in 2013 when he was still racing himself. I think you'd be hard-pressed to take that away from him in this year's.
I wouldn't want to try and take it away from him,
no. No, he'd still have it in his teeth and probably bite you in the ankle or something like that. But no, it's a great jersey to have. Everyone who's at the forefront, making the race happen, that's usually who it's awarded to.
All right, next up, we'll take a look at the teams making up the peloton and some of the new riders looking to make their mark. This is the Amgen Tour of California preview show presented by Visit California.
Remember, you can watch the race live on the Tour Tracker, the premier app for up-to-the-minute comprehensive information on the largest cycling competition in America. Can be downloaded free of charge for iPhone, iPad, and Android devices.
And here is the full list of the 16 teams that will be racing in the 2019 Amgen Tour of California women's race empowered by SRAM. 4 of the top 5 ranked teams in the world are here with Boels Dolman, Trek Segafredo, Sunweb, and CCC Liv. There are 5 American-based teams. 6 women per team makes up 96 riders. That's what's in the women's field. Welcome back, everyone. We've talked about last year's winner, Katie Hall, the sprinter Corinne Rivera, and a handful of other big names. But how about some riders now that you're looking to have a breakout performance in the Golden State?
One rider I was really looking forward to following in last year's women's Amgen Tour of California was Chloe Dygert. One of the most decorated track racers already as a young professional in the history of cycling. Had a tough crash on the opening stage of the women's race. Didn't get to see her. She's back. It's been a long recuperation. She's already won some road races, and her road racing career is just getting underway, and I'm really looking forward to see how she does in the Amgen Women's Tour of California.
I mean, I think everyone is looking forward to that. I'm going to be a little bit more biased. I'm going to go with the Midwesterner.
There you go.
Skylar Schneider, West Allis, Wisconsin, 20 years old, on Bowles Dolman's team. She maybe will not be able to shine so much personally, but I think working for Anna van der Breggen or someone else on the team for the sprints, I'm really interested to see how she could shine at the Tour of California. I know she's going to be highlighting this race throughout the entire year, so looking forward to Skylar Schneider.
And a big up-and-coming star in American
Big
cycling.
time, especially at 20 years
So
old,
good.
being on a team like that.
All right, let's get it back over to the men's side now, guys. 19 teams making up the men's peloton, 13 World Tour teams, 5 Pro-Continental teams, and making it their debut, Team USA Cycling. 7 of the teams are based in the United States, 8 riders per team, and we get 152 riders on the start line in Sacramento. This will be a chance, the first chance to see Team Ineos, used to be Team Sky. The sponsorship has changed, so that's a name we'll hear a lot. Team Ineos in the months coming up. Looking at all those teams, there must be some riders you expect to see mixing it up for the Amgen yellow jersey.
For the yellow jersey, I've got a young rider on my radar. His name is Tadej Pogačar. He's from Slovenia. He's won almost everything available to the younger, just 20 years old, but a phenomenal climber. And this year's Amgen Tour of California for the men, so mountainous. Watch for Tadej to be up there. UAE, it's not a team we get to talk about very much, but I'm looking forward to seeing him race.
I'm still going, I'm thinking, again, biased, but American, Brandon McNulty. Brandon McNulty, I put a lot on his shoulders last year, came up a little bit short. He had a flat tire in the time trial. This year, though, he just won the Tour of Sicily by himself off the front and then backed it up with an amazing showing on the mountaintop finish. So if Brandon has the same form, and his team, no less, I was very impressed with his team rally. If he could ride anywhere near how he's riding Sicily, he's going to be right up there.
We talked about the sprinters, and specifically, guys, some of the biggest names, 3 of the biggest names who've done very well historically at the Amgen Tour of California, Cavendish, Kittel, and Sagan. Let's say they are not at their best, and there's a chance for other sprinters to rise up and capture some of those stages. What names come to mind?
De Koenigs, Fabio Jakobsen is fast as grease lightning, very powerful rider. We saw Gaviria from the same team last year do a similar situation that Jakobsen might do, win all the sprint stages. He's wickedly fast, up and coming, and maybe the best sprint team in the business.
I'm going to agree with him right away. And if he can't do it, then Max Walscheid. Max Walscheid is kind of like Kittel 2.0. I mean, he's a massive guy, throws out insane watts. So I'm really looking at him from the stage number 1 in Sacramento.
We've devoted a pretty good amount of time to the sprints. The sprint stages are fun, but the real racing will be decided in the mountains, and this year the race returns to a climb that's now synonymous with this event, Mount Baldy. We'll discuss it when we come back.
He's gone. He has gone. Andrew Talansky's won the day. Well, he's crossed the line. The victory salute, the smile on his face.
I don't think Pete's ever gone this deep, ever.
Never.
Yeah, Mount Baldy is always good for some drama. Here's a quick reminder of how each stage looks. The sprinters could, in theory, have 5 of the 7 stages. The GC riders will be duking it out on stage 2 to South Lake Tahoe, and again on stage 6 to the iconic summit atop Mount Baldy. How do you see the leaderboard affected by the climbs on stage 2 and stage 6 to South Lake Tahoe and Mount Baldy, respectively?
I'm really looking at stage 6, and stage 6 almost entirely for the GC. Stage 2, it depends on the weather, I think. We've seen in the past, but with 14,500 feet of climbing in one day, it's really just accumulation of the entire week in general that I think I'm really looking at. And I'm not really discounting stage 3 into Morgan Hill. It has a big old climb around Hamilton, right in the middle, one of the hardest climbs of the entire, but it's a long way to the finish line. But really just, I'm looking at one stage, really, to be honest with you. At stage 6, that's the mother load right there.
You're forgetting last year's stage to Tahoe when Egan Bernal annihilated the field, was miles ahead. It's a little different. It's earlier in the week of racing, but I think the stage to Tahoe, it's a little bit different, but very similar climbs, similar gradients, but at high altitude.
Hey, I hope you're right.
I'm always right, don't you?
That's right.
Get back in the
That's the conclusion we're coming to.
Back
He's
in your
always
cage,
right.
yeah.
Right?
We've got a few days to see. Stage 2 is going to be awesome and a big part of the GC battle for the Amgen Tour of California.
All right, another competition that will heat up on those mountain stages is the Lexus King and Queen of the Mountains. A quick look at some of the past winners. On the men's side, 2 riders will line up this year who have won the polka dot jersey in the past. Always a hard competition, both to predict and also to win. I've heard it said there are different riders for different climbs. When it comes to the types of mountains that you get used to riding in the Tour de France and then you compare it to Mount Baldy, what do you see?
Ridden Mount Baldy many of times, never felt good.
Yeah.
It's a really tough climb. And climbing, let's be honest, it depends how you feel. If you're having a great day, climbs are a piece of cake. But when you're struggling, and anybody struggling on Mount Baldy is really going to suffer. It's similar to the toughest climbs in Europe just by the sheer magnitude of how much distance, how much elevation, and the steepness of the gradients. It's as tough as any mountain climb in any of the Grand Tours.
And I think a lot of it comes down to the heat there as well. It's really dry, arid, and it's exposed for the first, I want to say, the first 2/3 of that ride is completely exposed and has a little bit of down. And it's not only that, but it's the precursor climb that comes with it. You start uphill, and that hurts so bad. And everyone, it's a last chance saloon. Stage 6, if you want to do GC, if you want to have some teammates out there, you got to launch it. So I think it's really the climb before the climb that really hurts.
Best climber in the race, the one to be by himself, top of Mount Baldy.
That's the question of the day. I'm going to throw out a name that we might not be real familiar with. Sergio Higuita from Colombia, young rider on the EF team. I hope I pronounced that right.
You've been working, Bob.
I did some research on that, but phenomenal talent, and I think Mount Baldy is going to show you just how strong a climber he is.
I'd like to see George Bennett come to prominence yet again. We'll see where he's been. Like I said earlier, he got 6th place in Paris-Nice. It really hasn't been anywhere apart from that. Had a really strong 2018. And then, of course, Rigoberto Urán coming back from that collarbone. I mean, there's a lot of question marks. There's always question marks, and it's really hard to make those kind of predictions as we sit here right now. But that's why we go to the bike race.
Right. Exactly. It's kind of fitting, guys, that in California we've got a bit of innovation in this year's men's race. There will be no time trial. If you look at this graphic, you can see how big of a role the time trial has played in determining the overall winner of this race. Levi Leipheimer won this overall title 3 times, and every year that included winning the time trial. Not having a TT in this year's Amgen Tour of California has got to change things pretty dramatically, I would think.
Absolutely, and I kind of like the change. Give it a try, and I think the race will be a lot closer all the way to the top of Mount Baldy because there is no time trial, so that's going to be very interesting to follow. It does take the advantage away from some of the guys that are good climbers, not great, but solid time trialists like Rohan Dennis and TJ Van Garderen himself. But yeah, I like it. I think it's going to be very exciting.
The mechanics are jumping for joy. The mechanics are not having to bring bikes from Europe. They're so excited not to have this. But no, I agree with you. I like changing it up. It's always good to change things up to see exactly what happens. It's a ton of mileage throughout this week. So that's going to change things. And I think the accumulation of the miles is really going to show in the fatigue in the legs coming into Pasadena.
Bob said Rohan Dennis in a very good time. One rider who comes to mind is Aussie Rohan Dennis. He's arguably the best time trialist in the world, or one of the best, and comes in with Team Bahrain Merida. I would guess that a time trial, he's been a favorite since he was 2nd overall in 2014 and 2016. How do his chances stack up this time?
Rohan Dennis is trying to lay the foundations for a career as a GC contender. So the Tour of California, very important that he shows he doesn't necessarily need a time trial to be competitive, that he can do in the mountains what he needs to do moving forward with his career. Yeah. So even though there's not a time trial that would suit his talents really well, maybe he'll be a little bit more keyed up for the Amgen Tour of California because of that and to show himself in the mountains.
No, that's for sure. I mean, Rowan's an amazing bike rider. I was teammates with him. His time trial hasn't been that great. It's always hard for you to change from one team to another this year with Bahrain. But he's a robust rider. He's a strong rider. He really impressed in 2014, getting 2nd place up in some mountaintop finishes, something I didn't really think he was capable of doing. So I'm not going to count him out, that's for sure. He hasn't been at top form this year, so I'm sure that he's trying to shake that off, like pretty much half the field here. Really having not the best of springs and really trying to turn that page and rip it here in California.
American TJ Van Garderen usually is helped by a time trial. No time trial there. How much is that going to affect him?
I think that's going to be a pretty big hit to his morale just looking at the week's racing. Yeah. And he needs to be able to overcome that and show his real talent. He's a great climber. He doesn't necessarily need a time trial to do well in a stage race. So I think if he can get over that hurdle, he could have a great Amgen Tour of California.
And he could also be a joker as well. I mean, if you have TJ Van Garderen as a joker, that's crazy. If you're throwing him up in a breakaway in Tahoe, for example, or into Morgan Hill, man, you better get your boys on the front if TJ Van Garderen's going to have a minute in hand. There's no way you're going to take a minute out of him on Mount Baldy, for example. So I think they have a great cards. And you said it early in the show that EF has a very strong team coming to this race. So on paper, if they ride to their capabilities, they could be the ones that take down.
And we saw that whole team on paper here to start the show. On the same day that the men take on Mount Baldy in Stage 6 for the first time ever, the women will hit the same climb on Stage 2. Great opportunity for the fans to double down on the race action. Also, a great chance for the women. Who will you be watching on that day?
I think Katie Hall is who I'm going to keep my eye on. She is a pure climber, one of the very best in the business. Absolutely phenomenal. And this climb is so tough, it should be perfect for her talents. And she also has a great team in Boels-Dolman.
Yeah, she's going to be inspired. There's no doubt about that. But you have to look at Anna van der Breggen. Anna van der Breggen has been absolutely crushing the entire year. She has to be on the top of your list.
Anna is so powerful on the flats and such a great climber. It's really pleasurable to watch her.
Descents, crosswinds, you name it, she's got it. And even when Cape Epic this year on the mountain bikes, I mean, there really is nothing that she's not good at right now. So, yeah, it's going to be hard for Katie Hall to take her down. But if there is somebody to take her down, it would be Katie.
All right, guys, get ready for this next one, because coming up next, we'll put Christian and Bob on the hot seat and see if they can tell us who will be wearing the yellow jersey when the women and the men roll into Pasadena for the big finish of the Amgen Tour of California. Not done yet. Don't go anywhere.
The Amgen Tour of California preview show on NBCSN is brought to you by AEG. Give the world reason to cheer. By Amgen, in the race to dramatically improve patients' lives. Visit us at amgen.com. By Lexus, experience amazing. And by Visit California. Start your tour of the Golden State at visitcalifornia.com. California, dream big.
Here's a look at last year's top 10 final standings on the men's side. As we mentioned, Egan Bernal will not be back to defend his title. In total, only 3 riders out of the top 10 are back, and with no time trial, we have some uncharted territory. Going to make it pretty hard to know how this one's going to play out.
Almost impossible. And I think that's the best part about it, really. I mean, you look into this, even from the sprinters to the GC, you have a lot of unknowns going into place. And first of all, there's no time trial. And that's always the easiest way to say, okay, this is a great time trial. He could climb as well. 2 and 2 makes 4. This guy's going to win. Not this year. I think there's a lot open for breakaway contenders, things like that. The wild card, like we talked with TJ Van Garderen. That said, there still are some guys who are above the rest. There's quite a few of them. Yours, Bob? Who are you thinking?
I'm thinking about Tadej Pogacar.
Yeah, great show. 20 years old.
Young kid, and lightning strikes twice in cycling all the time, unlike the real world. But an unknown rider, relatively speaking, Egan Bernal, comes out of nowhere to win the title last year, and I think that Tadej has the physical characteristics to be able to do that. If he's smart, he'll be near the front in Tahoe and then really light it up on Mount Baldy, take the pressure off the team. It's going to be thrilling to watch how those 2 stages define the GC with so many contenders, and a challenge for us as pundits, but great for the fans to watch the GC play out in this year's
gun to my head, I'm going with George Bennett. George Bennett, winner 2 years ago. I think he's going to be really motivated coming back to California. He's done this race many times. Remember when he was back on Cannondale and really scrapping for a contract, if you could believe that, way back when, and then see him as a winner and then going top 10 in GC for the Giro d'Italia. So I think George is going to be getting here and really just thinking about that one Mount Baldy stage. He's a bona fide, pure climber, so he's going to be up there.
Always a good guest with us at some stage in the tour as well. Good mood, good spirits. Maybe he'll be even in a better mood if he comes through and wins.
Oh yeah, he has some
he's a good
choice
guest.
Words usually afterwards. That's
a fun guy to hang out with. All right, from the overall to the sprinters on the men's side again, Bob, who do you like?
Last year dominated by Gaviria. I don't see a single guy dominating the sprints, but I do see Sagan getting some wins, Fabio Jakobsen, and Max Walscheid. I don't think we'll see one guy that's completely destroying everybody in every single sprint. It's a great wide open pile of sprinters too to follow. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I would love to see some comebacks as well, especially with Cav. And then one guy we haven't talked about, John Degenkolb, another guy the comeback king, really, if you think of the car crash he was with. I would love to see him up at the front.
On the women's side, I'm gathering some consensus on who the winner will be.
Yeah.
Unless Christian disagrees with me, which I'd be very surprised, Anna van der Breggen. She's won everything. She did have a disappointing Liège-Bastogne-Liège Classic to finish off the spring classics recently.
Freezing cold rain, though. You know, if you think about her coming over, the only thing that could...
Revenge.
Yeah, revenge, but the only thing that could hurt her is something like she gets sickness or something going with bad travel.
All right, not going to be too long, only a couple months away. We're all going to be together on the Tour de France. I'm curious, what are you going to be looking for in California that might give you some insight as to how it might play out there?
Oh, the sprinters game is going to be huge. Cav's got to go good, Kittle's got to go good, and also Sagan. They got to get some redemption and some momentum going before the Tour de France.
I agree. It's all about the momentum and all about getting that swag back, especially for those guys. If you see Cav, he doesn't have swag, he's got nothing. So really, they need just the motivation for themselves to train hard going into the Tour de France.
I mentioned France, it'll actually be Brussels. I'll see you guys over there.
Yeah,
That's where it'll all get started. That wraps it up for now. Be sure to tune in to the live coverage of the Amgen Tour of California beginning on May 12th. For Bob Roll and Christian Vandevelde, I'm Paul Burmeister. Thanks for being with us, and goodbye for now.